Hello there my fellow notebook aficionados, this is the all-new 2024 Asus ROG Zephyrus G16 and it actually took me quite a while to come up with an intro for this one, since even now I have not really decided for myself what I think about this puppy. While this is an ROG device, it is a very clear departure from the 2023 M16, which was kind of the closest sibling to this one, but rather Asus opted for a very sleek and streamlined appearance, and while many people out there calling this the MacBook Pro of gaming notebooks, I am not so sure if this still classifies as a gaming machine. While the ROG DNA is sprinkled all over the absolutely gorgeous CNC'd aluminum chassis, all the major disadvantages of trying to cram powerful hardware in super thin laptops are also very present. So if Asus still managed to put together an enjoyable notebook experience, or if the compromise took over, well, let's talk about it after the intro. Right off the bat, our review configuration is a little odd to begin with, and there's probably a good reason it is not listed on any of Asus's websites, since it really does not make any sense. At the heart of the 16-incher we got Intel's Meteor Lake Core Ultra 155H, alongside an Nvidia RTX 4070 running with up to 105 watts, a mere 16GB of LPDDR5X-7467 MHz and a 1TB SSD. On the German website they list the 4070 SKU with a Core Ultra 9 185H and 32GB of RAM, which is a much better fit, especially since you cannot upgrade it yourself, but more on that later. That particular config will cost you 2,700 euros, while an RTX 4050 variant, which is otherwise identical to our sample, starts at 2,000 euros. And while I do not know if this one will be able to buy, I would assume it would land somewhere in between. All configurations will only be available with the new 240Hz QHD+ OLED, and as a first for 2024 we finally get G-Sync, which makes this an absolute treat for all different sorts of virtual entertainment endeavors. The main highlight of the new Zephyrus is of course the redesigned chassis, and by the way, we got the smaller brother, the G14, in the studio already as well, so please make sure to subscribe so you won't miss that review once it's live. And I really have to give it to Asus here. While I do not think the G14 or the M16 from 2023 have been bad looking notebooks, the 2024 lineup is on a completely new level. You may argue that these are just MacBook Pro lookalikes, but I would have to disagree. Yes, they use a lot of aluminum as well, but as I said in the beginning, they sprinkle in enough unique its and bits to really make it their own, and visually, I really like the blend of subtle creator lifestyle performance machine with enough gamer DNA to make this one classify as an ROG product. So you still get an RGB keyboard, and while that anime matrix thingy on the display lid is gone, you still get a single mini LED light bar that can be customized to your heart's content. In addition, the G16 feels absolutely incredible, and not only is it insanely thin, but it's also very light despite the performance you can get from it. You just have to keep in mind that the higher-end RTX 4080 and 4090 SKUs are a little thicker to accommodate a vapor chamber. Chassis rigidity is excellent for the base unit, which almost feels like a solid piece of aluminium. And while you can easily open or close the G16 with one hand, the lid is a little too wobbly for my liking. And the hinges could be a tad stiffer to match the rest of the premium notebook. In stark contrast to other brands that tried the super thin gaming or performance notebook in the past, Asus managed to slim down their laptops without sacrificing connectivity. With an HDMI 2.1, USB-C Thunderbolt 4, USB-A 3.2 Gen 2 and a headphone jack on the right, and a full-size SD card reader with unfortunately only average transfer rates, another USB-A and USB-C 3.2 Gen 2 on the left side, there is really not a whole lot to complain about. And if you do not want to bring the new charger, even though it is quite a portable one, both USB-Cs support power delivery. Wireless transfer rates are excellent, and the 1080p webcam is alright, if not particularly special. We would have wished for some improvements in this regard, because chances are you would use this one as a much more general communication device. In the maintenance department we have to deal with the first major compromise because of the much thinner chassis. Not only does Asus makes it a lot more difficult to get inside of this thing because 2 screws are hidden beneath 2 glued-in rubber feet, but the RAM is unfortunately also soldered, which makes this 16GB config very hard to swallow. And while most variants do come with 32GB, this is also the max RAM capacity, which will definitely be a deal breaker for some creators out there looking for a super portable and powerful on-the-go workstation. That said, there is a second NVMe slot, which is good news for relatively easy storage expansion. In the input department, Asus delivers once more, and despite the thinner chassis, we still get a very generous 1.7mm of travel, making this a great keyboard for both work and games. The layout might take you some time to get used to, especially with the relatively finicky arrow keys and single line enter key. The touchpad is simply massive and worked very well during our testing, with reliable tracking and gesture support and a nice weighted click that feels quite satisfying. Alrighty folks, it's display time, and alongside the new Razer Blade 16, the G16 is the first notebook to hit the market with this super fast 16-inch 240Hz OLED. And while you may already know that I'm a little partial to the display tech, it's hard to deny the fact that subjectively the visual quality is simply amazing. Brightness is of course the weak spot of the panel tech, with only about 420 nits on average in SDR and just around 450 in HDR. The mini LED panels used in the Flow X16 or M16 can almost double that, so I can see how it might be a bummer for some that Asus does not at least offer the option for those. That said, contrast for the OLED is unmatched, and color gamut coverage and color reproduction straight from the factory is simply top notch. In typical Asus fashion, they also offer additional color profiles for when you want to limit colors to certain standards, like sRGB for example. With insane response times and G-Sync, gamers will have their fair bit of fun with this panel as well. And considering that the screen can deliver stunning visuals for HDR story titles, as well as being the perfect option for super fast shooters at the same time, well, it seems like the Zephyrus G16 is a gaming laptop after all. PWM is still a thing with the G16 though, but Asus implemented a few technical shenanigans to make the problem less severe should you be sensitive towards it. Above 60% display brightness, they use the potentially less harmful DC dimming at 240Hz, while everything below runs with PWM at 960Hz. But let's finally see if the G16 can deliver beyond its pretty appearance. To give you some insight into the different power levels, we did again some general testing, and given the more mainstream focus, we decided to test the Zephyrus in performance mode rather than in turbo, since unfortunately it can get quite loud even though it will net you the best performance results. In the CPU department, we can see why Asus usually combines the Core Ultra 7 155H only with the RTX 4050. While it's not a bad chip per se, and the question really is how much pure CPU grunt you really need these days, the i9-13900H, which is commonly found in similarly focused machines from last year, is quite a bit faster. We hope we can get a sample with the Core Ultra 9 soon to see what the higher end Meteor Lake silicon can bring to the table. System performance is once more alright, without offering anything special to write home about. And while it might not matter during regular use, the drive in the G16 is not the fastest we ever came across in the past year, even though it can keep up its transfer rates without a problem. On the GPU side of things, we get pretty much the same picture, since we tested in performance mode, which lets the GPU run at only around 80 watts. So the sleek 16-incher therefore trails behind the competition. But the difference can relatively easily be rectified with utilizing the turbo profile, should you find yourself in the need for more performance. The results from our gaming rating might look disappointing once more, since most of the competition can simply allocate more power to both the CPU and GPU at the same time, resulting in better numbers in our 1080p suite of older, more CPU-bound games. So I would get your argument that the G16 is simply not a good gaming notebook anymore, but that really would not do it justice. Yes, you would get a couple of more frames out of competing devices. Still, I would say the whole gaming experience is much more than just raw FPS numbers. And while the RTX 4070 might struggle with a few really demanding games in QHD and rendered natively, with DLSS and in some slower games even with frame generation, you can get to 60 FPS with relative ease. So yeah, the G16 is not an uncompromising gaming machine. However, with the gorgeous OLED and enough performance in most games, it still manages to deliver a great experience despite the numbers. But let's talk about fan noise, and again remember that we are talking about the config without the vapor chamber, which uses a third fan roughly in the middle of the chassis. And it is really that fan that is a bit of a problem, since it's constantly running with a pretty high-pitched whine even in low load scenarios, which can get quite annoying to be honest. Under load, performance is alright given the thinner chassis, and turbo is, well, just loud. But do not take my word for it and enjoy our noise samples. As always, if you want further insight into our fan noise measurements, temperature and stress test behavior for the thin performance machine, please head on over to our written review. We also included some speaker tests, and guys, we finally might have a Windows machine ending the reign of Apple's MacBook Pros when it comes to laptop speakers. They are really just plain amazing. Away from the wall, the G16 performs once more alright. I would be lying if I say I wasn't expecting a little more, especially considering the lower end Core Ultra 155H. But 7.5 hours in our Wi-Fi test is certainly not really bad, but it's also not amazing, and once again only on par with what we have already seen from similarly equipped devices from the competition. Alright folks, it's time to wrap it up. Again, I am still not quite sure about the G16 in general. If you look at the numbers alone, you might end up disappointed. With relatively loud fans, especially that third system fan, and lackluster performance numbers compared to the competition, you might just be a little too quick to put the Zephyrus in the too thin to make sense category. But when you actually use this thing, you realize that Asus put together a great blend of features that certainly delivers an overall excellent laptop experience. Be it for media consumption, general productivity, creator tasks, or even gaming. I have high hopes that they may be able to fix the fan curve for the third fan, so that you can at least work in silence while doing less demanding tasks. And I'm actually quite interested to see what the higher end configs bring to the table with the RTX 4080 and 4090 and the upgraded vapor chamber cooling system. In the end, I think it really depends on where you're coming from and what you're looking for. If you want a hardcore gaming machine that can properly utilize the fast OLED with its insane refresh rate, and if you only care about the highest FPS numbers, well, you will probably not be happy with the G16. But if you are looking for a machine that can do it all, that you can easily take with you everywhere, which can handle a bit of everything, combined with a premium overall experience, well, then you should definitely check this one out. But please folks, let me know what you think, sound off in the comments below. And once again, please make sure to subscribe, since we got the G14 review coming really soon. And it's going up against the Blade 14 once again for a rematch, fighting for the 14-inch laptop crown. And I got the Blade 16 in the studio already as well, and you definitely do not want to miss that review. But that should be it for today. Thanks a ton for watching. My name is Alex, you have been amazing, and I cannot wait to see you all in the next one. Take care.